Let's talk about post-Major 1 roster mania. Obviously, we had the first event this past weekend, and after events, typically what you will see is a bit of a roster mania period where teams are going to change out players. They're going to make adjustments. So I'm going to go through every single team here in the standings, and we're going to talk about basically if I think they should make a change, and then also who I think they should change, because as you can see here, this looks crazy on your screen, I'm sure. This is all stats for challengers. And we're going to be using the stats and obviously the stats of the players on the current teams to basically decide who I think should go where and what team should make changes. So let's get it started, man. And make sure to drop a like, sub to the channel for more CDL content. But let's get started here with the Vegas Falcons. I mean, listen, there's not really a lot to say for the Falcons, right? These guys just have not won. They're barely competitive. They're 0-13 and they are hard point, 3-6 in SND, 1-8 in control. I mean, roster change wise, I don't really see them making anything outside of who's on their academy team. They need to bring Kicks back, right? Kicks, as you can see here, I mean, look at these numbers. Just look at those. He needs to come back to this team 1,000%. But for whatever reason, he's not here. It's personal reasons. Hopefully he can come back. But also, it wouldn't be a bad idea maybe for them to bring in Hamza, Glowfrosty from their academy team onto this team for potentially Roxas or Dahum. I think Xnid and King are going to be a good little duo for them to try to build around sub-wise. It's really their ARs who I think need a little bit of work. Keeping it moving, let's talk about Cloud9 New York. Also, these standings for the overall season on Breaking Point are just not fully updated yet, but we're just going to go in the order that they are anyway. Cloud9 is in an interesting spot, right? This is a team that is underperforming, a little bit better on LAN, but overall is should be better, right? With the names on this team, they should be better. Attach and Sib have been pretty bad, and their SMGs have been pretty good, which is the opposite of what everybody expected. Their best mode is probably Hardpoint. They're 8-11. They're 7-9 in SND, and they're 4-7 in control, so they're not really good at anything. And a lot of people want to bring Pred onto this team, right? He's teamed with Mac, he's teamed with Sib, he's teamed with Accuracy, who's their coach. But for me personally, I kind of feel like it needs to be an AR player that is moved here. Looking at Attach's numbers, pretty underwhelming right across the board. Above average in SND, but right around below average and everything else. And then Sib is above average in SND, but below average and everything else. I think, unfortunately for Attach, Sib is like the guy with the keys on this team, and I don't see him going anywhere. So I actually do think potentially a move here for this team would be to drop Attach and to try to pick up a selfless AR player that's going to give Sib the green light and allow him to play his game. And then you have this AR player who can, you know, hold his own, but he'll sit in the hill, will have good comms, good leadership, the right mentality for the game, and just fill the gaps where needed on the map. And I think for C9, a potential player here will be Tyler Fellow Johnson. Fellow obviously has been in the league before, but looking at some of his stats and how they would compare to Attach here, if we look at overall, right, as you can see here on the screen, overall he's sitting at about a 1.01 KD so far in Challengers, and these numbers are from the first Elite, by the way, in case you were wondering. In terms of his kills plus assists by his deaths, right, so your elimination ratio, basically, as you'd see in the scoreboard in your games, is a 1.42, so he's doing his damage. Kill time-wise in Hardpoint, he is sitting at about 65 per 10, right, so that's clearly more than Attach. Kills per 10, he's sitting at 23, so a little bit more than Attach. SND is a little bit worse. He's got 0.61 kills per round. And then in control, he had about 20.39 kills per 10 minutes, so a little bit better. Obviously, these are challengers numbers, so you got to remember they might not be the same in the Pro League. But I think the way Fellow plays and what he can bring to a team, and he has a winning mindset. I think he knows how to play the game. He's a really good teammate. I think this is something that would enable Sib to play better, and Kremp and Mac are already playing pretty well, so I just think overall this could benefit the team. Now let's move on to talk about the LA Gorilla Mates. This is an interesting roster, right? One that I think could make a change, could not make a change. At the end of the day, the big problem for them is their SND. They're 4-9 in search, as you can see, and they go to a lot of game fives. If they were able to close out their game fives, right, look, 3-2 loss, 3-2 loss, 3-2 loss, 3-2 loss. They got 4 3-2 losses this year. They have not won a single game 5. You win a couple more of those, you're looking much better. I think personally, this is a team that probably won't make a change. It would be one of their ARs. It would be Priest or Skies. I think Priest has stepped it up recently, and I just don't think Skies is the guy who gets dropped after one major. So honestly, I kind of see this team sticking, but I do think a potential player, if they decide to move on from one of their ARs, probably Priesta, could be Cobra, right? You already got Linz, you got the French organization. Might as well continue to double down on this and bring in Cobra. He's got a 1.2 in EU challengers at the first Elite. Obviously, Katie isn't everything, but all around, he's just a good player. And him and Linz were supposed to be a duo into this offseason. Obviously, things fell apart with that. So I think Cobra to this team could make sense. Next up, let's talk about the Miami Heretics, a team that is pretty straightforward. They obviously just got top 3. I don't see them making a change. The obvious answer would be to bring in Super for probably Lucky, right? Since I would say Lucky is probably the odd man out relatively on this team, and him and Super play the same role. Right now, though, I just don't think they make a change, right? They just got top 3 at a major. They're probably feeling pretty good. So they're most likely going to stick. Now let's talk about the Minnesota Rocker. And this is another team where I think the move is pretty straightforward. If you look at their team, if you look at the stats across every single mode, pretty much there is one player that kind of stands out as, the numbers, KD and numbers aren't always everything, but clearly seems to be a player that is standing out here, and that's Paul X. And obviously, I have to preface, right? Like, I don't know what goes on behind the scenes for these teams, how integral a guy like Paul X is in their comms and their mentality and the way they play the game, things like that. So he could be doing a lot more in the back end, a lot more of the intangibles. That's really, really important to this Dark Horse Rocker team. But to me, I think if we just look strictly at what we've seen gameplay-wise, there's a very obvious upgrade. They've talked about Paul X being the guy they brought in for Search and Destroy. And there's one guy who we know historically has been really good at SND that's sitting in Challengers. And of course, that guy that everyone's been talking about is none other than Illy. In Respawn's, Illy might not be the biggest upgrade over Paul X, although I do think he would at least raise the floor of this team. But I think in SND is really a matter. Overall, in Challengers at the Elite, he had a 1.0 KD, a 0.9 in Hardpoint, and a 1.07 in Control. So 0.9 in Hardpoint's not the greatest, but I mean, if you look at Paul X's number, he's sitting at a 0.85, so it's really not that much worse. But in SND, he's sitting on a 1.3 with 0.84 kills per round, which would put him as pretty much probably the best SND player on this team, right? If you look at the numbers. So I think Illy in for Paul X, specifically to be the guy for Search and Destroy, since I think Nero, Geo, Nestrial can lock it down pretty well in Respawn. I just think Illy overall, I think he raises the floor and the ceiling for this team. Moving on to talk about the Vancouver Surge, one of the teams that I think is potentially the most fun to talk about because there's a couple different things these guys can do. Overall, this team is just not good. Their teamwork's not good. They're 7 and 11 in Hardpoint, 6 and 9 in SND, and 5 and 5 in Control. They kind of need upgrades across the board looking at their numbers. Everybody negative in Hardpoint. Only Hixie doing well in SND, and then a little bit better in the Control for these guys as it is their best mode. For me, I think first things first, I think Hixie's got to go, right? Unfortunately, he is their best SND player, but he just... Slayer rating of a 78 for an SMG player is just not good this year, right? SMGs are kind of the superstars on a lot of teams this season, and I think they need someone to really help out 04 in the kills department, and for me, that guy is going to be Neptune. He has looked good in Challengers. To give you some of his numbers, he's got a 1.11 KD. He had an 88 Slayer rating, so right there you could see, I mean, that matches the likes of 04. A 1.1 in Hardpoint, 27 kills per 10 minutes. He had 1.25 in Search with 0.86 kills per round, and was number 1 in First Bloods for the Challengers Elite in NA. He had a 1.09 in Control and 22 kills per 10. So, I mean, just looking at his numbers, right? I mean, he's going to be basically just getting you more kills in every single game mode. Neptune looks really good at this game from the bit of Challengers I've watched and from the stats we can see. People are kind of calling him like the miniature Hook, right? Like if dropping Hook coming into this year, if they were to pick up Nep, it'd kind of be like the same move. But honestly, hindsight's 2020. They clearly should have kept Hook, and I think Neptune is kind of that next guy that takes that Hixie role and just raises the floor of this team to at least get some more kills. I also think they could potentially look at replacing Nasty. I don't think Nasty's honestly been like all that bad, but for a team that's struggling this much. And also, I feel like he was, he's been kind of hit or miss a lot of this season, right? You could see his numbers. I could see them moving to another AR player, maybe a guy like Lunars or Dylan Rex. You could bring Lunars and Neptune both from Omit potentially here, but I definitely think at least a one-man change like we already talked about is necessary. Obviously, we're not going to talk about Atlanta FaZe. The Ravens, I've seen people discussing dropping Vivid and bringing someone else in, right? The numbers for Vivid aren't all that great when you look at like overall KD and things like that, but the Ravens are a team coming off a top 4. I think they've been playing relatively well. And considering how well the rest of them are playing, it's not the end of the world if Vivid is a little bit lackluster, especially being as like, he's kind of doing some OBJ work. He's kind of filling the gaps, right? Vivid does a lot of the intangibles on the map. And I could see them maybe potentially making a move to bring someone else in for this role. But right now, I think they're going to stick. LAT is fine. And honestly, Ultra and Optic are also fine. People have been discussing potentially dropping Insight for a different AR player. I think Insight's just been too good, too consistent, and done too much for his organization over the years to drop him after one major. You want to see him pick up the pace a little bit, right? But I don't think it's happening. I really think the last team to talk about here is going to be the Boston Breach, because this is a team that was really good online, but underperformed heavily on LAN. And I mean, you could see the numbers, right? There's 3 players on this team that I feel like are struggling a bit. For me, I think the SMG duo should stick. I think Purge and Snoopy look good together. I think the way they play together on the map is, the teamwork they have as a duo, I think, is one of the best in the league, actually, even though Purge is underwhelming on LAN. I think it's the ARs where they really need an upgrade here. And from what we know and from what we hear in the listen-ins, it feels like Cammy is their IGL, right? Cammy's kind of the guy in the comms who kind of keeps everyone together and formulates the plan and, IGLs, right? Like I just said. So I don't see it being Cammy. Honestly, for me, I think you kind of move on from Big Wake here and you bring in another AR player that is just going to guarantee you kills and is going to help Snoopy in that department, right? Because Slayer rating wise, a 94 for Snoopy is great. An 88 for Purge, even though he's got a negative KD, is still good. You just need someone that's going to pick up the slaying, especially if you're going to keep Cammy around for the sake of the IGL stuff. And for me, I think there is actually a really good answer here. And that guy is going to be Lunars. I think what Lunars has been doing in Challengers, I think he probably, from the bit I've watched, looks like the best AR in Challengers right now. He's got a 1.23 KD, 81 Slayer rating, which given CDL numbers doesn't sound that good, but was actually one of the best Slayer ratings for ARs in Challengers. 1.18 in Hardpoint, 24 kills per 10 in HP, 1.27 in SND with 0.79 kills per round, who's also one of the best at getting first bloods for an AR player. A 1.31 in Control and 21 kills per 10. I just think Lunars comes into this roster and he really helps them get more kills, which is something I think would help this team be a bit more consistent and would really help them in Control, being as they're 3-7. Boston's in a spot, though, where I could see them not making a change, right? Like, I think the teamwork and the chemistry is probably pretty good for these guys, which is also why they've been performing well. But I just don't see this roster being able to win or even really contend. And I think they're like one move away from making themselves like a solidified top 6, top 5 team. So I think Lunars for Awakening is the move. But yeah, that's a bit of my roster mania predictions and who I think people should drop or who I think should stick together, things like that. Let me know what you think. Who do you think in Challenger should be picked up and what teams do you think should make a move? Honestly, by the time you see this, I mean, hopefully no one's made a change when you see this, but by the time you see this, there could be a change. Who knows? Or rumors. So we should be seeing some stuff, and I'll keep you updated with any roster mania news here on the channel. But if you enjoyed the video, drop a like, sub for more CDL content, and hopefully I'll see you all in the next one.